electricity, one to many, top down. What is so interesting about the internet is it's organized to be distributed, collaborative, and it scales to lateral power. For my generation, lateral power is a complete oxymoron. Power is always top down. It has been since the great hydraulic civilizations, 4000 BC. But for the young people under 30, they see powers peer-to-peer, side-to-side, and laterally scaled. This is a sea change in the way we think. So this internet revolution in communication, which is distributed, collaborative, and scales laterally, is just now beginning to converge in Germany, Denmark, a few other places, with a new energy regime, distributed energy, which has to be organized collaboratively to scale. And it actually moves in a lateral framework. This is a perfect fit. A perfect fit. What are distributed energies? Well, let me compare them to the energies we're familiar with. Elite energies, coal, oil, gas, shale gas, they are elite. They're not found in the backyard. They require huge military investments to secure them, huge geopolitical investments to manage them, and massive finance capital to organize them from the wellhead to the final end user. Totally centralized, top-down power regime. What are distributed energies? Those are energies that are literally found in everyone's backyard and in every square inch of this biosphere in some frequency or proportion. The sun shines all over the world every day. 45 minutes of sunlight will power this global economy for a year. The wind blows across this beautiful little oasis in the universe every single day. Under the ground, all over the planet, we have a hot geothermal core of energy ready to be converted to our use overnight. In the rural areas, we have agricultural and forestry waste that can be converted back to energy. On the coastal areas where our urban populations are, the ocean tides and waves are coming in every single day for energy. And wherever we have garbage, we can anaerobically convert it back to energy overnight. We have enough of this distributed renewable energy to provide for our species until kingdom comes. The European Union has committed to a 5-pillar third industrial revolution infrastructure to shift the paradigm in the 21st century. I was privileged to develop this for and with the EU. We formally endorsed it in 2007. It's working its way through the Commission. And some of you know last week, May 29th, we held a summit in Brussels, the European Commission, because the whole world wants to know what's our growth plan. Does Europe have a growth plan? We do. And President Barroso hosted the Mission Growth Summit, the New Industrial Revolution. Vice President Tajani, the industry minister, and myself, we laid this out. You can go get all of the talks. We had CEOs from across Europe, industry ministers. We have a plan. We have a plan. Pillar 1, we shift to 20% renewable energy by 2020. That's not a suggestion, that's a mandate. Every country has to do this. Pillar 2, how do we collect energies which are distributed? Now, I have to say, and our first thoughts were very, very traditional. We said, well, let's go to Italy, Spain, and Greece. They got a lot of sun. Put in some big solar parks, a high-voltage electricity line. We ship it off to Europe. The Irish have a lot of offshore wind, big wind parks. Put a voltage line, ship it out. The Norwegians have the hydro, etc. None of us oppose these more concentrated uses of what are essentially distributed energies that are found everywhere. They're the low-lying fruits. They're essential, but they're not sufficient. We cannot run a continental economy anywhere in the world simply on concentrated hydro, geothermal, solar, and wind. It cannot be done. There's not enough. And the cost of shipping it long distances loses electricity because of the thermodynamic losses. You with me? So pillar 2, we ask the question, if distributed energies are found in every square inch in the world, why in heaven's name are we only collecting them in a few points? Then we realized we were doing 20th century thinking based on top-down fossil fuels that have to be centralized and shipped, and nuclear power. This got us to pillar 2. How do we collect energy that's everywhere? In our infrastructure. Buildings, buildings, buildings. We have 191 million buildings in the EU, and as you know, buildings use the most energy and have the most CO2. Parenthetically, the number 2 cause of industrial-induced climate change is beef production and consumption in animal husbandry, and not a single world leader in 192 countries has made a single statement on the number 2 cause of climate change for fear of upsetting the public. Even Al Gore doesn't want to talk about it. Number 3 is transport. Number 1 is buildings. The goal in the EU is to transform every single existing building, if we can, to your own personal green micro power plant. So we can grab solar off the roof or thin film, and now we have paint. Have you seen the newest development? And the solar's right in the paint. Just paint the buildings and let the paint collect it. We can collect wind off the sidewalls with vertical wind technology. We can take geothermal heat pumps and get that energy under the ground each night. We can convert our garbage back to energy that works. The new buildings, they're already up, zero emission, positive power. WHEC, the great French construction company, just put up a gorgeous drop-dead office complex near the OECD headquarters, positive power. Generates enough electricity just from the sun to provide all of its own potential needs and can send back to the grid at any time. Pillar 2 jumpstarts construction. It's going to require millions and millions of jobs, thousands of small and medium-sized enterprises, all local, for 40 years to convert every single building in Europe to your own power plant. This is what jumpstarts the economy. Construction's the elephant in the room. Let me use an analogy here. 1970, a few mainframe computers. Companies were sharing information, very expensive. This kid, Steve Jobs, comes along. He invents the personal computer. Now, 30 years later, and who would have imagined this? 2.3 billion people with a little desktop computer, so cheap, or a little cell phone, so cheap, can send their own video, audio, and text to each other, distributed and collaborative, with far more lateral power than all the television networks in the world put together. Tell me if tell me we can't get this done if we really have the narrative and the vision and the drive. We connected the entire human race, potentially a third of it already, at the speed of light. So, the analogy is today we have a few power and utility companies and we buy their power. But already in Europe, we have several million players because of the feed-in tariff sending power back to the grid. What I'm going to suggest is that in 10 years from now, tens of millions of buildings will be sending a little bit of their own power back to the grid. In 25 years from now, hundreds of millions of buildings will be sending somewhat of their power back to the grid. It's following the same cost curve, these renewable harvesting technologies, as the shift to desktop computers and cell phones. It's a 25-year scale-in. The costs are going down. We saw it in wind. We're seeing it in solar. Biomass and geothermal are coming up. And eventually, the technology to harvest these distributed energies that are renewable are going to be so cheap, they'll be as cheap as cell phones. Then the sun off your roof in your factory, it's free. The wind off your wall is free. The heat under the ground of your building is free. Your garbage is free, converted back to energy once the harvesting technologies become cheap, and they will. Germany has converted 1 million buildings to at least partial power plants in 8 years and created 370,000 net jobs, and they're 20% green electricity and heading to 35% in 8 years. Not surprising, they brought us the internal combustion engine with Daimler and Benz and the Autobahn, the second industrial revolution. This is now where we have to head. But the problem is, these are intermittent energies. This gets us to pillar 3. The sun isn't always shining. Sometimes there's cloud cover. The wind blows at night. You need the electricity during the day. I don't have to tell you, Alan Lloyd's here, is the EPA director formerly of California, and these are the challenges that we saw in Shannon, Baxter over here. We saw this in California, but we see it all over the world. These are intermittent energies. We have to store them. This leads us to pillar 3, and without pillar 3, the other 4 pillars won't work. Now, I'm in favor of any kind of storage technology, batteries, flywheels, capacitors, water pumping, bring them all on. But at the center of the storage network, we have concentrated our attention in the European Union on hydrogen. Because it's the basic element of the universe. It's what we're made out of. It covers other energy. It carries other energy. And it's modular. We can put a little fuel cell in an apartment or with a big utility complex. It can cover the load. So in 2003, I asked Romano Prodi, when he was president of the European Commission, to put up 2 billion euros, as you know, to start the R&D. We did it. Then under President Barroso's leadership of the European Commission, we set up an 8 billion public-private partnership to move hydrogen storage into the system. I had asked Chancellor Merkel to do it, and for Germany, she set up 500 million. We're now ready to start scaling in all the technologies you are developing in this room, because here we have the global hydrogen enterprises, the scientists, the engineers, the businesses, and we have no choice, and I'm going to explain why in a few moments. Storage. So, for those of you who are lay people here, the sun hits the roof of your little factory or home, you gather up some solar electricity. If you have some surplus you don't need, you put the surplus electricity in water, the hydrogen comes floating out of the tank. Some of you missed this in high school chemistry, I can see this. The hydrogen comes floating out of the tank, and then when the solar radiance is not hitting your roof, you simply convert that hydrogen in a fuel cell back to electricity. A tiny thermodynamic loss compared to bringing coal, oil, gas, and uranium at every step of conversion to us at the final end line. Pillar 3, storage. Pillar 4, this is where the internet revolution converges with the new distributed energy revolution to create a nervous system for this third industrial revolution. We use off-the-shelf internet technology. We convert the power lines, the transmission lines, the electricity lines of Europe to an energy internet. They call it a smart grid. It's really an energy internet. So when millions of buildings are collecting just a little bit of their own green energy on site, storing it in hydrogen like we store media in digital, then if you don't need some of that green electricity in every given moment of time, you store it in hydrogen like we store media in digital, you can sell your surplus back into the grid from the Irish Sea to the outer edges of Europe, just like we now create our own information, store it in digital, share it online. The smart grid is being tested now in Denmark, 6 regions of Germany. Korea just began an experiment testing it. We're beginning to test the rollout. Pillar 5, the last pillar, is logistics and transport. Electric vehicles are here. Fuel cell cars, trucks, and buses, as you know, in mass production in 2014 and 15. This is a done deal. Daimler, GM, Toyota, Hyundai, this is happening. We'll be able to plug in our fuel cell vehicles anywhere in the grid, get green electricity from our infrastructure and buildings. Then wherever we travel, we park, and every parking meter has a power charger. Simply power charge it up, get electricity for the grid, or if you're at work and your car's out there, the software can be programmed. If the electricity price goes up on the grid, your software can direct your fuel cell car to convert back and sell its electricity to the grid. I was just in Brussels with my wife last week, as I said, and right there near the Parliament, there's some smart cars out there in a car sharing. They're connected up to the parking meter. The plug is right in there, it powers up, and for €7, you get that car for 1 hour and bring it back. It's here. These 5 pillars, and this is why I was anxious to talk with you. It's been many years. These 5 pillars alone are just components. The fuel cells, the electrolyzers, the smart grid, the energy internet, the plug-in transport and logistics, the power plants, buildings and power plants. What I'm saying to you is each of these pillars alone are nothing. They're simply components. It's only when we connect the 5 pillars and create the synergies that we have a living framework, a mega technology platform, an infrastructure for a new economic paradigm in history. Do not make the mistake that President Obama made. His heart was in the right place. He wanted a green economy. He's still talking about it in his re-election. It failed. The reason is he didn't understand the narrative. He didn't understand that the great economic shifts occur when communication revolutions merge with energy revolutions and manage them, and then you have to lay down all the pillars of the infrastructure to make it operational. So what he did is he spent billions and billions and billions of dollars of U.S. stimulus money, tax money, on standalone, isolated, one-off, piloted projects. So he would finance a battery factory in one state, a solar panel factory in another state, all unconnected. You all know what I'm talking about? There's no green economy. We have to put it all together. We've learned this lesson in the EU because the feed-in tariffs have been very successful. So we now have regions that are trying to put green electricity back to the grid. That's pillar 1, renewable energies. We got a lot of folks trying to get green electricity back to the grid. But we haven't moved pillar 4, the smart grid, the electricity internet. So this old grid is servomechanical. It was only designed to go in one direction. It isn't digitalized, and it leaks 20% of the electricity. It is a disaster from an engineering point of view. So we realized we moved Pillar 1, renewable energies, but we didn't have Pillar 4 moving, so the smart grid, the energy internet, could take all that energy and actually begin to manage it. Then we realized that feed-in tariffs have been so successful, we have regions that are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% green electricity. We have some people from Spain here. Aragon and Navarra, Spain are 60, 70% green electricity, and we are losing 3 out of 4 kilowatts often across Europe because we didn't move Pillar 3, the storage in time. We've got to move hydrogen now. And people say, is this the moment? This is the moment. We've got to get the storage in. Every home, every office, every factory, across the entire utility complex. Now, there is no way to invest in a renewable future when we lose 3 out of 4 kilowatts, there's no storage. And because we don't have hydrogen to store it, we can't manage the surpluses and the deficits in the grid on peak and base load. In Sicily last week, I understand that the solar radiance was so high, the price of electricity went down to 0 during the day. And then at night, it shot through the roof. And unless we can bring hydrogen in to store and manage the flows across regions, we can't make this work. Does this make sense? We can't make this work without that hydrogen storage to actually manage the flow. And finally, our transport companies like Daimler and GM, who are in our group, they're scared because they're bringing out the electric vehicles and now the fuel cell vehicles, and unless the rest of the infrastructure starts to phase in, they're orphan transport. They have no structure. So these 5 pillars together, this is a third industrial revolution. This is power to the people. This is a disruptive economic revolution with immense significance. The music companies, they didn't get it. They didn't see it coming. Millions of kids started, apparently millions of kids had nothing else to do after school but figure out new software to share music. We called it cheating, they called it sharing. Music companies thought it was a joke, then they tried to legislate, then they went out of business really quickly. The newspapers did not see the blogosphere coming. Amateurs, millions of people exchanging news, information, video, who cares? Now the newspapers are going out of business all over the place, or trying to create blogs to create value. As powerful as the democratization of information is with the internet, it's only half the story. The other half is when the internet communication revolution converges with distributed energies and manages a shift to lateral power. And hydrogen becomes the vehicle to store that energy so we can actually manage it across continental economies. Let me explain, if I can, how this democratization process is going to affect every industry. And again, keep thinking storage with hydrogen. We've now democratized the internet, correct? So information is pretty cheap. Transaction costs are almost 0. Go up on the cell phone, doesn't cost you anything. Now we're going to democratize energy, and the harvesting technologies are going to get cheaper as the internet manages those technologies. This allows us, this infrastructure, to then democratize manufacturing, marketing, and logistics, and change the way we do business. 3D printing is now here. There are several hundred companies doing it. We now can code software with internet communications that allows a small or medium-sized enterprise, a mini manufacturer, to layer by layer take molten plastic or metals. The software will direct layer by layer the building of a 3-dimensional product, and it pops out of the printer like magic. What's interesting about 3D printing is not just that it's the IT and internet revolution brought to manufacturing. What's fascinating is it's additive manufacturing. I grew up on subtractive manufacturing. Centralized factories, you bring a lot of material together, winnow it down, pare it down, waste a lot of it, and then you create the automobile, for example. With additive manufacturing, there's no loss because the software is directing the molten plastic or metal layer by layer to build up the product. It uses 1/10 of the material, 1/10 of the energy. Then follow my drift. If you're a local mini manufacturer with your own printer and your green energy on site is there for your manufacturing to run the whole process because you're collecting your green energy on site in an industrial park or a producer co-op scaling together with other companies, you don't have to worry about the price of oil on world markets. And then how do you market your product if you're a small mini manufacturer? In the old days, you need a lot of advertising money, radio, TV, magazines, newspapers. You had to scale vertically. Now, all you need is the internet. Etsy. How many of you heard of Etsy? E-T-S-Y. It's an interesting site. This kid dropped out of NYU 7 years ago. He wanted to create craft furniture in his apartment. His parents must have gone ballistic. So the kid starts creating this craft furniture, and then he realizes he never figured out how to sell it. So he's getting kind of loaded up with furniture in his apartment. So he gets together with 2 other kids, and they create a software site, a website. And now thousands and thousands of little craft manufacturers are on the site, freely advertising, and millions of consumers go on the site, pick the craft producer they want, and they make a deal. The only cost is a tiny commission fee when the deal is made to Etsy. You know how much this Etsy made this year? $500 million. The kid called me up 6 months ago. He's so excited. $500 million, no marketing cost. Then, if you're producing in the local region and your green transport is provided by your own energy, you have logistic costs that are very, very low. All of this depends on hydrogen to store that energy, to manage the flows embedded in the products and the energy flow. This is the democratization of everything: information, energy, manufacturing, marketing, logistics. Changes the nature of the game. Our transaction costs start to approach zero, then we have to rethink our business model. Let me give you an example. The power and utility companies. When we first introduced this idea of the third industrial revolution, power and utility companies weren't all that happy. Not happy. He said, no, we want to control the supply, we want to control the distribution, we want to control the last mile, and we want to sell electricity. We said to them, get used to this. Right now, we have millions of people creating their own energy and sending it back, but in a few years from now, tens of millions, and in 25 years from now, hundreds of millions, just like the shift to desktops and cell phones. We're going to produce the energy in our producer cooperatives, our SME associations, our industrial organizations. We'll sell it to you. What's the mission of the power and utility companies in this new era? You run the electricity internet, but it'll be supervised by independent authorities, so it's open and transparent like the internet. How will you make money? We tell them you will make money a new way, and you will make more money. You will make money by selling as little electricity as you can sell. And then they say, you out of your mind? We give them the IBM case study. It's a cliche case study in every MBA course. Lou Gerstner and his team realized in the 1990s that IBM was in trouble, that IBM computer had no margins. The Chinese, the Koreans, the Japanese all had the same computer. The margins were not there. So IBM went into retreat, and they asked, what do we actually have that people want and need? It's not a computer. What we have is our ability to manage information. Now, IBM, Cisco, HP manage information. Everyone has a CIO, and it's become a booming business. Well, we say to the power and utility companies, your real expertise is not selling electricity. It's managing energy flows. Embedded in the products, because products are made out of energy, construction materials, et cetera, embedded in the supply chains and the logistics. So the new mission for the power and utility companies, we'll sell you the energy, millions of us, you run the energy internet, and you set up partnerships with thousands of companies, small, medium, and large, to manage their energy flows. And why would you do this? To the extent that, let me stop here. Whether any company succeeds or fails in the next 25 years, anywhere in the world, will not have much to do with their labor costs. It's going to have everything to do with their energy costs. Whether any company succeeds or fails during this volatile transition with an old energy regime that's still locked in place, the prices are going through the roof and they're volatile, a new energy regime that has to scale in and be stored, the whole question of whether you survive or sink will be your energy cost. Now, I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret in economics that's just going to change the ballgame for the way we think. What causes productivity? When Robert Solow won the Nobel Prize on economic growth theory, he let the cat out of the bag. He said, we used to believe that productivity, which is the whole key to economic success, is based on putting capital to labor. You put a lot of capital per worker, you increase productivity. But he says the problem is, when we study this, that only accounts for 14% of all the productivity of the Industrial Revolution. Where did the other 86% of the productivity come from? He said, we don't know. Can you imagine the economists don't know? The reason is they haven't studied the laws of thermodynamics. Because when economists penned classical and neoclassical economic theory, Adam Smith, Baptiste, The rage at that point was Newtonian physics. So they used all the metaphors. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So we have the invisible hand and the pendulum of supply and demand. The laws of thermodynamics weren't discovered until the late 19th century by engineers and chemists, and by that time, economics already was settled. But as you know, it's the laws of thermodynamics that actually govern economic activity. We have low entropy inputs in nature, both embedded energy in material form, loose energy. We transform it. Every time there's a transformation, we lose energy in the transformation. We have temporary utilities, and then eventually they go back to nature. Some of it is entropic loss, recyclable with a bill, and that's really what economics is about. So we now know, in the last few years, Robert Ayers over at INSEAD, Skip Leitner on my team, and others have been doing the studies. We now know where the 84% of the productivity comes from. Thermodynamic efficiencies. But every engineer could have told us that in this room, correct? So, to the extent a power and utility company can help all their companies, small, medium, large, manage their energy flows embedded in their products, supply chains, logistics, keep their energy margins up by reducing their energy costs, and to the extent, though, the companies increase their productivity by the thermodynamic efficiencies, the companies will share their savings and productivity back with the utility companies. Shared savings agreements. Far more money to be made in shared savings agreements and sharing productivity gains than selling electrons. Many power and utility companies are now starting to move toward this. I've been meeting with the energy companies and utility companies. Some are worried they want to stay in the old portfolio. I say you need to be in both. You're going to be in the centralized fossil fuel and nuclear portfolio for a while, but you've got to wean into the new business model. Many of the utility companies will fail. They will go out. Already ESCOs, Schneider's and ESCOs and others, ESCOs, energy savings companies, are moving into the new model. They can aggregate the companies and the users and bring together engineers, people that are well-versed in hydrogen storage, in IT technology, in electronics, in logistics, in construction, and aggregate companies, ESCOs, that can manage energy flows for whole clusters of industries, producer co-ops, big industries, and then share the productivity gains and just send it back to the grid, in which case the utility companies are going to be more and more irrelevant except for the wire. The first and second industrial revolution scaled vertically because we relied on centralized electricity and expensive energy. So you had to have centralized factories, production, and logistics to scale vertically, correct? The third industrial revolution scales laterally, and it comes in differently. The first and second industrial revolution favored national markets, top-down, and national governments, more centralized. The third industrial revolution comes in like Wi-Fi, nodally. Wi-Fi was an improbable invention. You could try to imagine one person taking their their garbage frequency on the garage and then connecting to the next garage and the next garage and the next house. We connected whole continents in 10 years. Lateral power, nodally. The third industrial revolution does not respect boundaries. It comes in just like Wi-Fi. If a city like Rome, we did the master plan for Rome, for the mayor, if Rome creates a 5-pillar third industrial revolution node, it immediately is smelling for another node. It has to find another node. Because when it has a surplus of sun or wind or biomass or water, because the water tables are up, it's got to sell its surplus. It's looking for Munich or Oslo or Warsaw. Or when one part of a continent is on daytime, they want to sell their solar electricity to another time zone in the continent that's nighttime. Or if there's wind going on at night in one part of the continent on time zones, they want to sell it to the people out there that are in the daytime. So in the third industrial revolution, we have to imagine thousands and thousands and thousands of nodes across continents, think internet, who are collecting their local information that's called energy on site, storing it in hydrogen like you store media and digital, and then constantly looking for other nodes to share that green electricity across continental land masses. The third industrial revolution favors continental markets and continental political unions. That's why we are determined in the EU to move through this door, or we're going to really be in trouble. And the door is we have a golden goose, 500 million consumers. And we have another 500 million consumers in our partnership regions in the Mediterranean, Gulf, and North Africa, potentially 1 billion people, the wealthiest market in the world. The next stage of European integration is to create thousands of nodes across Europe and the periphery and create a seamless energy grid where we're sharing lulls and surpluses, and a seamless energy internet to collaborate across continents, and a seamless communication and transport grid in a single integrated market. That requires a political union to set the code, standards, and regulations. The Asian Union is forming quickly, and they're going to do this. I was just with Mayosha's son. He's the president of SoftBank.